Good. Thank you so much for the time. Really appreciate it. Adrian, also, thank you for your time. I mean, I can imagine it's been an absolutely torrid year in many respects. How have you actually dealt with COVID-19 this year? And what has that impact been like on you, your family, business, all of those?
Oh, it's good to be with you, Arabile. There's no way to dress this up, hey? What a tough year. I wrote an article recently where I referenced Queen Elizabeth's 1992 observation that it had been annus horribilis because the royal family in England had suffered a fire at Windsor Castle that had some very tragic family circumstances, including suicide. And then shortly after her speech, the separation of Prince Charles and Diana was announced. So she described 1992 as this absolutely awful, horrible year. And if those are the criteria for an awful, horrible year, then 1992 was actually very average, because 2020, well, I mean, who could have imagined this? And it has been horrific, horrendous from so many different perspectives and angles, including well, let's just start with the macroeconomic stuff, where the world economy finishes the year 5% smaller than it started. In some economies, forget about millions of jobs lost, tens of millions of jobs lost. In the Indian economy at peak, it was estimated that 130 million jobs had been lost. And then those macroeconomic numbers start to become company numbers, where we get business fallover and business failure, and ultimately it lands up at the level that you and I know. It lands up at the level of our homes and households. It has just been an absolutely awful year by so many different measures, and I know that a lot of people are wishing that this is all done, but as we're closing out the year, we're getting news of a second wave in the Northern Hemisphere.
Yeah, I suppose my big question as well has been, will we be able to bounce back? And when I say we, not just South Africa, but really the world. I mean, yes, we've had pandemics in the fall, but we've had pandemics before, but the globalization aspect that we kind of live in now sort of makes it very difficult for world economies to survive without each other. And if each one is still experiencing COVID, it makes it even harder to try and find any sort of recovery, surely.
I think that is such a fascinating question or angle, because if you think of coming into 2020, there was this growing sort of nationalist sentiment that it was Trump versus China, Brexit, Britain wanted out, a lot of political parties looking inward globally, this growing sort of sense of we're better off if we build walls and we keep others out, whoever the others are. And what COVID has demonstrated to the world is, well, pandemics don't worry about borders. You can build as many walls as you like. Pandemics will find their ways over, around, through walls. You better learn to talk to each other, and this is a global problem, and it needs a global coordinated solution. And so what has really struck me is, here's one silver lining from 2020, is the extent to which policymakers from an economic front, fiscal policy and monetary policy, stepped in so quickly in a coordinated fashion, recognizing that the problem was in the collective, not one country's problem, but everyone's problem. And I think that was such a profound sort of universal messaging. The other is that if you have a virus that jumps borders and boundaries and doesn't care about walls, then you can put up as many borders, boundaries, walls as you like. You haven't got the solution. And so this requires coordination between countries, between communities, and across political systems to establish a global solution to COVID. Those are, I think that if there was one real positive that comes out of 2020's COVID experience, that would be it.
Do you think we learn differently, or we're going to do things differently from a monetary policy and a fiscal policy aspect? I mean, I ask because even maybe let's focus on the local aspect a little bit. I mean, we decided we're going to have this loan guarantee scheme, which in itself is just putting people into more debt when we're a debt-ridden society nonetheless. And then on the other hand, you were hoping, of course, to get lower interest rates, and all of that is meant to aid, again, more debt. Are we perhaps finding the incorrect solutions to things at this point? Do you think we can do them better?
Without question, we can do them better. Those solutions might be more band-aid than genuine and critical reforms. You're absolutely right. Throwing money at the problem doesn't solve the true underlying structural issues. And one of the things that COVID has shown in its impacts, and indeed in the remedy, the vaccine, is that not only remedy but also solutions are very unequally shared. So already we've got hand-wringing about, well, who's going to get their hands on the vaccination first? And we know that it's going to go to countries with money before poorer countries. And then inside of those countries with money, who gets it inside of the countries with money? So not only have the remedies been unequally, the fiscal and financial remedies been unequally shared, but the solution, if it resides in the vaccine, is also unequally shared. And so that also lays bare that one of the problems that we've got that starts a long way before 2020 and extends beyond is global inequality. And no one in South Africa needs introduction to that topic. We are the world leaders in inequality, and I think that what this year has done to South Africa is it's taken us back a number of steps, in that it's pushed us deeper into an unemployment strain. It has stressed the fiscus. The ratings agencies have called us out right at the start of the of lockdown, and people blamed the agencies. I'm sympathetic, but I'm not a sympathizer, because the ratings agencies have been telling us for a long time we were doing the wrong things. But whether you agree or don't agree with the ratings agencies, what's inescapable is that we have gone deeper into financial and fiscal stress in South Africa. And the economy will finish the year, the world economy -5, South Africa probably -8, with 2 million new unemployed. This really is stressful stuff. Deeply stressful.
Adrian, we were meant to get perhaps a kick up the rear end, if you want to call it that, with the ratings agencies having downgraded us many times before, not just this year when we finally got to a full house of non-investment grade ratings, right? We should have been understanding where we are already, considering our track record then in implementing reforms, which at this stage feels almost non-existent. How long till we get back to even pre-2019? Now, that's a low bar, but at the very least, it would mean that we've, gotten rid of the 8% that we will lose this year.
Well, if you take the forecasts from the South African Reserve Bank, which I think are very good numbers to work with, they point to a reasonable economic bounce next year. But then quickly after that, you're back into South Africa's low, trapped structural growth story of 1.5%, maybe 2% per annum. And if you allow for 3% growth next year, and then you're back into 1.5% and 2%, it's possibly only 2024 before South Africa is back at the end of 2019 economy in terms of size. So this truly is, the now overused word of the year. I don't know how many times you've used it, but word bingo, unprecedented. Hey, I mean, this really is unprecedented. Yeah. It's going to take us 5 years to get back to the end of 2019.
Sure. Absolutely incredible. And it's so sad because the poorer will, unfortunately, even in 5 years' time, unfortunately, will have not recovered yet, right? This is a best case scenario really for the rest of the country, considering that everything gets back.
Yeah, but Arabile, so there's in a short space of time, there's so many things to talk about that you're flagging. The one is, all right, the economy is going to finish 8% smaller, and this tragic consequence of 2 million jobs lost, income per person is going to be lower, inequality is going to be more strained. But there are other effects and impacts that might translate into even deeper and more permanent scars. And you have to think of children in the education system who have now a critical lost year. And the prospect of recovering that lost year, the damage there is I want to be optimistic and say that the damage is deep and it can be reversed, but there will be instances where it isn't, and that the damage is permanent. So that really points to the importance of us getting these structural reforms in place. And South Africa, the glass half full, I would point to a number of structural reforms that I think that we can fix and have in place fairly quickly, some of which are already on the table, like the release of spectrum, which is, I want to go beyond penned in for March of next year. That the Zondo Commission looks like it is having consequence, and that there will be convictions. Those convictions, getting people into orange overalls, that's the low-hanging fruit, right? The orange, the pun shouldn't be lost. But getting people into orange overalls would restore investor confidence in South Africa and demonstrate our institutional capacity. We've got superb policy, and there's good leadership in the country, but we have to get out of the writing about it and talking about it into the evidencing of these reforms. And those structural reforms could actually help South Africa get into a much better place well before 2024.
Sure. We keep saying, though, that we've got great institutions, and that's what the ratings agencies have also said for many years. Is that enough anymore? Does that even matter anymore, considering that we haven't done anything with it by the seams of things anyway?
Yeah, look, we're walking past it, right? We're squandering this strength and capacity, and you might even call this an act of folly. That in the face of such dire, stressful circumstances, it seems like the message still doesn't quite land. And as a case in point, when we went into COVID in March, when lockdown was announced, one of the first policy positions was, we've got these critical structural reforms and we will use this period to urgently get them in place. Well, here we are, it's December, and I don't see those structural reforms. I still don't see them. Now, that I think is a textbook definition of folly, where you have blown the crisis, and the crisis gives you the opportunity. And there's lots of things that we could have squared up to in this, including, not just the importance of releasing spectrum, but issues that the ratings agencies and National Treasury, so forget about the international agencies, domestic National Treasury has been banging on for years about the importance of right-sizing our wage bill, that we've got a public sector wage bill that we simply can't afford. COVID gave policymakers the opportunity to square up to that, and I don't think we've taken that opportunity.
Sure. I wonder now, though, that it feels as though we realize that we're forced into doing something.
It's landed.
The problem is, however, Adrian, we don't have the money for it. So where do you sit on the whole, we spend ourselves out of trouble, which kind of is necessary in order to get a lot of the reforms done, but at the same time say to ourselves, we need to cut back on things like salaries and the like as well, and try to limit how much money we spend. Such a difficult balancing act that we've continued to speak about for finance ministers up and down the ticket of presidents.
Wow. Okay. So where do I mean, you're asking me as a direct question. Let me, as an economist, try and give you a direct answer. Where do I stand on that spectrum? I don't for one moment believe that we can spend our way out of this by using wages and salaries, because the spending on wages and salaries leaves nothing to show, given our fiscal circumstance, other than debt. However, we can spend our way out of this in a very constructive way, and here I'm going to lean on another pun, and that the construction is in building engineering infrastructure. The beauty of building engineering infrastructure is that there are strong spillover multipliers, linkages across the economy, that when you put in place fiber optic cable, hospitals, schools, you reach up and down the supply chain. So you need aggregates, you need logistics, you need skills, you need engineering firms, and what's left is permanent infrastructure that has spillovers for many, many years, whether it's dams or highways or hospitals. So there truly is a powerful multiplier effect that could step out or be born out of the infrastructure program that sits in the center of this ERRP framework. I think that that's a critical ingredient, and it carries much, much promise. What is equally critical is that we recognize we haven't done well in recent practices in terms of the way in which we have borrowed and spent money. And so it's not just about what we spend on, but also where we borrow from and how we allocate that money, and that we do not repeat the mistakes of the last 10 years. And that is not a finger pointed at the public sector only, because on any side of a transaction, there are two parties to corruption.
Yeah. Very finally, Adrian, where to from here? What does 2021 look like? Is it another one of those where it's 20 plenty before 2021? That's kind of the message we all had hoped for. 2021, kind of difficult to call, isn't it?
You know what? So they say you should never wish time away, but boy, I hope that 2021 feels shorter than 2020. I mean, this feels like it's been 3 years. We got value for money here, in terms of time. But maybe rather than what do I think 2021 is going to bring, I know it's going to bring surprises, and I know if I make a forecast here, it's going to be wrong. But perhaps I can talk about what I hope for. And what I hope for is the urgency of structural reforms to be brought about, that sanity prevails in terms of the importance of bringing about those reforms. South Africa is a country that has incredible opportunity and prospect, and it's only ourselves that stand in the way of realizing that. And if we can get out of our own way, I think we carry the seeds of such incredible opportunity. And in all of this, we've got to know that we will be hit by shock, by surprise, sometimes unpleasant, sometimes pleasant. And I'll borrow from Nassim Taleb, who says it's excusable to be surprised by a tsunami or an earthquake, but it's not forgivable to build something anti-fragile. So we should know from 2020 that even if 21 is better, it's going to have its nasty edges and tough elements. So we take that sober reality into what I believe will be a much better year. Hard to do worse.
You're 100% right. It does seem very hard to do worse. Adrian Saville, thank you so much for the time. Really appreciate it. Hope that discussion and our conversation kind of sums up not just 2020, but hopefully the sentiment is true even going into 2021. And I hope things get even better from here on in.
If you'd like to book either of these fantastic, terrific, professional gentlemen, famous faces, thanks for joining us.